Welcome to Coming from Left Field, where we have conversations about politics, books, and current events with your host, Greg Godels and Pat Cummings. On September 9th, 2016, at a fundraiser in New York City, Hillary Clinton made the following statement about supporters of her opponent, Donald Trump. You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables, right? They're racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. If you've been paying attention to American politics over the last decade, you may ask some version of the same question. Why did so many working-class voters, the traditional backbone of the Democratic Party, swing to the right? And what, if anything, can be done to win them back? Our guest today suggests that Hillary's deplorable comment has a lot to do with the cause of many voters' drift to the Trump camp. Let's discuss. Glad to have everybody here this morning. It's bright and early on the West Coast where I am, and we are with Joan Williams. And you, Dr. Williams, you are you on vacation or are you on a sabbatical in Italy right now? Which one of the two?
I'm not a doctor, no PhD, but I
Oh,
am in Siena
oh,
for the entire month of October,
nice.
sort of on a book leave. I come here to get away from running things and just write.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you say you aren't a doctor, but you are quite an academic. You have a BA from Yale, master's in city planning from MIT, and then a law degree from Harvard. And you have written a remarkable number of books that collectively examine equality, inclusion, regarding systematic barriers facing women and working class Americans. Let me just read one note here about you. New York Times describes Joan C. Williams as having something approaching to rock star status in a 2007 profile highlighting her influence as a leading voice in gender equity and workplace reform. So you're one of those DEI guys that Trump is talking about, right?
I
Is that?
am, I am. I've been doing DEI work for over a decade.
And I listened to a couple of your lectures on it, and I think you and I are simpatico in how to approach that subject. So we're here though today to talk about your book Outclassed. The subtitle of this book is How the Left Lost the Working Class and How to Win Them Back. Tell me a little bit about what prompted this book, this subject.
Well, I couldn't have predicted with certainty that Trump would win in 2024 because I don't think anybody could have, but I certainly had a gut feeling that he would, along with the knowledge that if Democrats managed to squeak through, we were still playing a game of inches in a context where we're playing the game of inches at this point with the future of democracy, and that struck me as extremely ill-advised. So I had written after 2016, I wrote a book called White Working Class, explaining why Trump won. But this one goes back with a much clearer description of how to get out of this mess.
Well, Greg and I are both from the Midwest, Central Illinois, grew up there, and have so many dear friends still there. And it's interesting to see what you're describing as the shift in politics with the shift of our friends that we, went to high school with and college. And sometimes when we visit and are on the phone and chatting and connecting, it's confusing to us what's going on with them politically because all their values and intelligence and they're good
Mhm.
people, and
Yeah.
yet they're Trump supporters. and
Hmm.
and I liked how you framed this issue, and I want to show one chart just to kind of show you, I think, part of your argument, and I'll put this up on the screen.
Hmm.
This is a chart that shows the economic growth of the bottom 50% wealth income and the top 1%
Hmm.
from 19, was the past couple of decades.
Hmm.
And it's the same as the charts that show the uh, real wages. I think in your book, you said if you were making what you would be making in the 60s and 70s, it'd be 42% more
Yeah, if
than,
real wages had continued to rise when productivity rose, as they did after in the decades after World War II, wages would be 43% higher.
yes, yes.
And two-thirds of that, three-fourths of that decline was in the 15 years before Trump first won.
And as we were talking before you came on with Greg, I said that's one of the things that I liked about your book so much is that we're so used to looking at what's wrong with these blue collar workers or what's wrong with this. And you're saying, wait, 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 time out. 50% of the population in this, I don't know if you want to call them middle class or in a certain income
I just call
range
them the middle 50%, literally the middle 50% of people in households in the country.
are getting screwed.
Yes, they have gotten really screwed.
And
And they know it.
they know it, and Gavin Newsom, I don't think knows it. I'm not sure Ezra Klein knows it. I'm not sure Kamala Harris knows it. I don't know. What is that? Was that what's going on here? You're the expert.
Well, I mean, the place to start is to recognize that inequality predicts low trust. And so, why doesn't this middle 50% have confidence in democracy? The low trust stems from the fact that democracy hasn't delivered for them in the past many decades. And so they're open to trying something that's as extreme as Trump.
Right.
And the reason that it hasn't delivered is that in those, again, we heard these original statistics, but in the 15 years before Trump was first elected, nearly all of the net job growth was in gig work. In other words, work without benefits, without a future, often only part-time. And so people in the middle, I was talking in another book event with a group, and one of the women introduced herself as a Teamster who worked for UPS. And she said, we all have five jobs. If
Hmm.
you have five jobs and you still can hardly afford childcare, much less hope to buy a house, you are pretty disillusioned with the
Hmm.
system that has landed you there.
Hmm.
And that's why people are so angry. People are so
Greg,
angry because they got screwed.
Greg, why don't you give me some of your thoughts about how we're approaching this topic?
Well, I think it's a great thing to bring this to the attention of people beyond the working class. People in the working class in America know what's going on. They don't have to be
Yeah. They
told
don't need
about
us
it.
to tell them.
But I think that it's a good thing to bring it out, and I welcome that. I think there's so much in the book that is worthwhile. I think there's some real problems in the way we're discussing this, though, and one of them is that in the title, the left. It's not the left that doesn't understand the working class. It's the center that doesn't understand the political center that doesn't understand the working class. And if you look at the rebellion, not just Trumpism, but AFD in Europe, if you look at the Maloney in Italy, you can go around Fidesz in Hungary, all the parties, you talk about them in your book. They're all reactions to the center. They're all rejections of the post-war center. And I think what you have to do is you have to be a bit of a historian and know why that rejection occurred and how it occurred. And I think this is an attempt to patch up a Democratic Party that's not patchable, to be honest. I mean, I don't think you can convince the Democratic Party that they need to think about the interests of the working class. If you look at the history of the change in the 70s of the Democratic Party away from the working class, It came from the breakdown in the traditional coalition, which was not a pretty coalition. It was the South and the working class and African Americans in the North. And that was broken with the civil rights laws. It was, I mean, I'm glad it was broken, but it was broken. And so in the end of the 70s, the Democratic Party, when it had a great opportunity with the rejection of Nixon to refigure itself, it turned to the suburbs. And that was an easy way to go. And that's when the cultural issues started to take precedence over the economic issues. And I think that's the history that we've got to confront. I mean, as well as, I mean, I think we don't want to just find a way to convince Democrats to embrace workers. They got to give them something. They haven't given them anything since the 60s. The coalition, the Cold War coalition was created with the Treaty of Detroit. And that's why you had productivity and incomes marching along together. When that was broken, the union movement was already broken. It was still it was a Cold War union movement that had no guts because they destroyed the left and the union. That's the real left. And we haven't had a real left in this country politically for a long, long time. So, I mean, I wonder how you'd address that. I mean, do you believe the Democratic Party is salvageable?
I certainly hope it is, because if we have to wait for the founding and the flourishing of a third party, we're not in good shape. That's just not the history of politics in the US. You're right that the New Deal coalition placed blue-collar workers at the center. Now, they didn't place cultural issues at the center because at that point, college-educated elites were pretty conservative, just like people in the middle. They were all pretty culturally conservative. And then what happened is my generation of hippies came up and we placed at the center things like sexual liberation, environmentalism, various equality projects, the equality projects I spent my whole life on, race and gender. Excuse me. And we shifted the focus of the Democratic Party onto those issues. And I think all of those are super important issues. I mean, I think it's easy to romanticize the New Deal coalition, but as someone who's spent a lot of time working on gender, it often wasn't a very pretty picture from a gender standpoint. And it often wasn't a great picture from a race, a very mixed picture from a race standpoint too. So I do defend my generation of hippies. I also am someone who is extremely concerned about climate change. But I also am clear-eyed enough about social class to realize that if you're worried about making it to the end of the month, you're not so worried about the end of the world. That seems like a pretty abstract concern. And I think one of the things that's happened is that although in our parents' generation, where it looked like we're all of a certain age, elites understood that they were elite. And then my generation of hippies came up, and one of the elements of being in the professional managerial elite in our generation was not just class blindness, it was to deny the existence of class. We just chose to prioritize the issues that we chose to prioritize because that's what ethical people did. We are the inheritors of enlightenment. And people who don't prioritize the same issues that we do, they're just, I mean, I always tell the story. I was having lunch with a friend of mine in San Francisco, another San Francisco progressive, just like me. And he said, Joan, I read your book and I learned a lot. He said, can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
But he said, like, I fucking hate these people.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
He is only different in his honesty with most of my crowd. And I think that, you know, that somebody who is a genuine, gentle, sincere individual and a progressive, you would never express that towards a different disenfranchised group.
Right.
And the fact that he could express that and feels that about people who are disadvantaged by class just speaks volumes about where we are and about why the Democratic Party is finding it so difficult to shift from a world frame around college educated progressives to the life world of people who actually live in the middle and have
Right.
blue and pink and routine white collar jobs. This is a very different world.
I yeah, I come from the same milieu. I mean, I grew up at the same time you did. I think I went through that era, but my roots were in the working class. I mean, I came from a family. I was raised by my uncle who was a coal miner for 27 years,
Mm,
UMWA, and I worked since I was 13, and then I got to college, and I think probably in the late 60s, early 70s, I discovered as a working class kid how my history had been distorted, how my history had
mm,
been. It took me that long to figure it out. I
mm.
was
Yeah.
on track to be a philosopher and all this stuff. But what I discovered, when I met some people that were around the left, the real genuine left in the 50s, it really turns out that those issues that you're associating with the 60s were there in the working class movement. They were in the CIO. The CIO was in the early 40s, was in fact anti-racist. It was more anti-racist than any institution in America. It was in the constitutions of these CIO unions. The unions were pro-women. They accepted and welcomed women into their struggles. And in a real sense, they were a preamble to what we went through in the 60s. But that was cut short by the Cold War and by the Red Scare. And that Red Scare is what destroyed any opportunity for that to have continuity going forward
Mm.
in the working class movement. They were essentially denied it. I mean, the Ruthers and the UAW, the UAW was in the Constitution was we've got to have blacks involved and it's anti-racist. But once they signed on to the Cold War agenda, there were no blacks for 20 years on their
Yeah.
executive board. And it
I
took
mean, the more
struggles to get
recent
it
history
back.
of the union movement is pretty mixed with respect to those issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
I mean,
true.
not no longer, I have to say. Now for, well over a decade. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Greg, in looking back to an unsullied left that we just have to return to. I guess my view of history is a little different, having come up through women's history. And I think the relationship of the union movement to other equality projects other than class is a little more mixed than you're making it sound.
I'm only asking for recognition of the fact that the Red Scare
Right.
destroyed what was way advanced in the union movement and the working class movement. And they were bringing those issues forward when nobody else was.
Mhm.
But you have to understand anti-communism and its role in America, like racism, anti-communism in the 50s just set everything back. And so, yeah, it's great that we're
But you're you're
recovering. The
you're
union movement
you're looking
hasn't
at this.
hasn't jumped in.
I mean, I think that, and then we'll let Pat talk,
No,
but
go. No.
I I certainly think that if we had union density of more than, what is it, 6% in private
6%.
employment, we would be in a very, very different place.
Although the good news is, if you look at, I think you referenced this Robert Reich's recent
Yeah.
survey about the American sentiments towards unions, labor unions,
Yes.
has just skyrocketed.
Finally, finally.
Finally,
What is it,
finally.
70% approval? Something
Yeah, it's
outlandishly high.
unreal. I
Mhm.
Okay. I think that, Joan, when I was reading your book, you just were just talking about me. You were
Mhm.
talking about, especially with your DEI work, and you're saying, listen, we were making progress with this. Talk about um, gay marriage. I remember when I was against it. I remember when Barack Obama was
Interesting.
against it. I have so many friends now that are married, and I'm looking back and saying, I can't imagine them losing these rights. In other words, those changes, those social changes, I think truly are important. and valuable and shouldn't be dismissed. And I agree with that. But the other thing that I agree with is that, and Greg really just absolutely slaps me down about this. I love Rachel Maddow. I think she's bright. She's a smart person and Rhodes Scholar, but that is not approach talking to people like Rachel Maddow talks to people with her high IQ and intellect and
Yeah,
remarkable
her high
background.
IQ on display in every nanosecond.
Right. Yeah. That's not how you're going to win friends and influence people.
She ain't
And
gonna make it with anyone anyhow.
so I start this podcast with an introduction, and my introduction was a little thing about Hillary's deplorable comment
Yeah,
and how she said, and if you read the whole comment,
I know.
it wasn't actually that bad,
Yeah,
but it shows you how effective the Republicans and Trump. Trump is a genius at picking these grievance issues and weaponizing them. And that I don't think that lost the election, but that tone pretty much lost the election. And that's what you're talking about your friend, and that you were having dinner with, or Pinot or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah. Yeah,
in
I mean,
beautiful
for
San
an
Francisco.
American politician to say half of X group is deplorable.
Right,
I mean,
right,
she said half of, basically half, she said. So, I mean, would you be making that kind of a statement, anything like that about African Americans? No, immediately you would see that was completely inappropriate.
right,
But
right,
somehow she didn't see that that was inappropriate. And that's a good example of the kind of class blindness. If you don't understand that people are strongly sorted by class, you're not going to be able to be an effective politician. And I'm
correct,
sorry, but that was one of the limitations of that campaign.
right. And that gets me back. I want to say something nice about Greg. He's a grouchy old grumpy guy a lot of time, but I remember when we first started this podcast 4 years ago, we were swapping books back and forth, and Greg has a pretty strong background in philosophy and Marxism and so forth. And I sent him a copy of J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, and I said,
Elegy.
I think this is just great, Greg. Look, and Greg sent me very nice. He sent me back a critique, an academic critique of multiple people who were basically saying JD was full of crap. That his critiques were that there's something morally wrong with
Yeah.
these people in the Appalachia, and really was a nice way of me realizing, yeah, I'm missing the point. When Appalachia is being crushed with no jobs and all of these economic issues, then you just can't tell people to suck it up, Buttercup, and have a good day and have a good attitude
That their
and
only
learn to
problem is they
code.
don't work hard.
Or they don't work hard. Right,
Mm.
right. And I think that kind of evolution is something that you're pushing in your book. People are voting for Trump. Women are voting for Trump. I I can't
Why,
understand this.
why don't people get it? I mean, that's what the book addresses, I'm happy to say. It
Yes.
looks at why don't people get it? It asks the question, why don't people get
Well,
it that this
I
happened?
even
And why
even
don't
more,
people?
I think they are getting it, Greg. Trump is
Yeah.
their middle finger, having
No,
been ignored
no, I don't
by
mean them. No,
the
that's
professional managerial, yeah, I mean,
well,
what the Thomas
you and
Piketty
Pat,
calls
before,
the
I
Brahmin
don't mean to
left.
interrupt you, but that's not what I asked. I mean, you and Pat
Mm.
misinterpreted that. Why don't I mean, why don't people that are your counterparts get it? You get it, but why don't they get it? Why don't
Well,
Pat's friends
read
get
read the
it? That's
book.
what I'm asking, not the people in the Midwest. Why don't
Mm.
your
Mhm.
Yeah.
cohorts get it? Why don't they understand that Trumpism is a phenomena created out of disappointment
Mm.
around the way politics
Yeah.
is going in America? You have I didn't know this number, and I really appreciate it in your book. The 19% of the Trumpites that are identifiable from some study or another as a
Hmm.
racist core. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the most important things. All my
Yeah.
liberal friends, oh, Trump's voters are all racist. To me, that's more damning than saying a deplorable. But
Yeah.
they all say that's just not true, and you
Hmm.
show it's not true. But
Hmm.
my question, I'll
Are
ask
people
it
still
again.
saying that, Greg?
Oh yeah, our liberals are still saying
Yeah,
to me that they're all
yeah.
racist.
Really? Oh,
But
goodness.
let me rephrase my question. So because it was to you guys because you have friends like this. Why don't they get it? Why don't your friends get it? Why don't the San Francisco guy get it?
My friends, too.
Oh, I'm asking Joan though about the guy she had coffee. Why didn't he get it? He said he hates these people. Why doesn't he understand why they did what they did?
I think, well, first of all, just to put to piece the racist point, because it's of course an important point. Racism is one of the strongest predictors for Trump voting. But that's not why he keeps winning, because that's not enough people.
Right.
He wins because he also attracts a much larger group of voters whose attitudes towards people of color really don't differ very much from those of non-Trump voters. So racism is a necessary component of Trump winning, but it's not a sufficient component of Trump winning. And I've actually been thinking a lot about this, Greg, since I've been in Siena. And really, from the 13th century until almost until the through the first half of the 20th, elites distinguished themselves through elegance and through their taste for high culture. That's how you signaled that you were an elite.
Mhm.
And then around 1980, there was a shift. And the way that you signal that you're an elite today is through cosmopolitanism and through sophistication. Cosmopolitanism, you're a world, a global citizen, but you also signal that you're very attuned to other people whose traditions are different than yours. For example, I've invented something called the new class bubble quiz that will tell you in 10 questions whether you're part of this middle 50% or whether you're the part of the top
Bra
20%, the
Brahmin
elite.
elite, yeah.
And the question in the class bubble quiz that predicts with eerie accuracy not only whether you went to college, but whether your parents graduated from college, is the following question. Would you prefer to eat in a family style restaurant with large portions of traditional favorites or in a truly authentic ethnic restaurant? If you prefer the truly authentic ethnic restaurant, you are almost certainly part of the elite, and so are your parents. That's the cosmopolitanism. And the opposite of cosmopolitanism is rootedness. The rootedness of this middle 50% is way overdetermined. They are rooted because, first of all, that's how you get blue and pink and routine white collar jobs. You get them through family, through networks of family and friends. My husband's my husband used to laugh. He grew up in a working class family that he got his jobs in college because his mother had friends in low places, the unemployment office. They're also rooted because that's the way you get good childcare and good elder care and help fixing the roof. You don't want to have to buy that stuff because the stuff you're buying would be crappy because you can't afford it. So you stay close to home and you avoid your disadvantaged place in the capitalist market, to speak Marxian for 1 second.
Mhm.
And there's so the rooted the other part of being rooted is has to do with the economy of social honor. Among the elite, you garner social honor by showing that you're a cosmopolitan sophisticate. But in the middle, you garner social honor by through traditional institutions like the church, the military, traditional family and gender roles. That's one of the reasons people in the middle are more traditional from a gender standpoint. Because even if you're not a rich man, you can be a real man. So the research shows that that along with this rootedness, there's this continued loyalty to traditional institutions. These are deeply structural reasons why people in the middle are different from people at the top. People at the top are, number one, cosmopolitan, and number two, they gain social honor through what they see as sophistication. Sort of part of it is Rachel Maddow talk, sort of displaying your cultural capital at every nanosecond. But part of it also is through a distanced or ironic or skeptical relationship with traditional institutions, which they belittle. For example, religion. And so you have these deep cultural dynamics where you have a struggle for social honor between elites and non-elites. You have very different logic of life in these two arenas. And one of the things that's a little disheartening about the cosmopolitanism is that in my crowd, to be a good person, you have to understand the disenfranchisement of people in Gaza and immigrants and Bangladesh. But people in Mississippi, they're just ignorant. You know, people who are voting for Trump, all of a sudden, your cosmopolitanism vanishes. And what is replaced by a complete lack of understanding and a lack of the sense that good people strive to understand people people in their own country whose lives are so different from theirs. That's why people are so screwed up.
That I think is one of the most important things about your book. And that's what made me reflect also. You know, you talk about the values of showing up to work, the values of consistency, the values of the working in the community, all of these things. And they're often interpreted by Brahmin left Rachel Maddow
Mm.
loving me as why are you, Jesus, virgin birth? I mean, religion, you're still going to the Catholic Church? You're doing
Yeah.
this? My daughter-in-law grew up in a rural part of Washington State, and the Catholic Church in her community is just one of the biggest parts about that community. And I
Mm.
went to a funeral there. First of all, it's a small town, and everybody in the town was there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the church served this function that, I mean, I grew up in the Catholic Church as an altar boy and so forth. And I think of it as just superstitious crap. And I realized this was foundationally one of the most important,
Yeah.
powerful parts of that community.
Mhm.
And I diminished it, I mean,
Yeah.
I
In
would have
our
diminished it.
crowd, that's the thing to do.
Yeah,
It's a sign of sophistication, right? Not to
yeah,
be
yeah.
falling for that virgin birth crap.
And any thoughts about this? Greg, you're trying to get some plumbing done in your house and you were a wine importer. That didn't work out very well for
Well, I
you.
wanted to bring up the fact that I spent a work career catering to the elites or associating with the elites in my life because I was in the wine business and I also became a bit of a wine expert, if I could be immodest about it. So I traveled in some of those elite circles of collectors and so on. So I'm more critical of elites around morality. So it's not a cultural phenomena that I look at when I look at working class culture or working class life and elite life. I see elites really as absorbing the logic and the thinking and the morality of neoliberalism when it occurred. You went back to 1980 and we're talking about that era. So elites are transactional. So basically, I mean, not all, of course. I mean, obviously, if you're on this conversation, you care about people. But most elites don't. They're transactional. So friendships are really based upon transacting and getting something for giving something. And yet, working class culture, working class life, as I know it, I still know it because I go back to Illinois where I grew up, an industrial area. I have it here in Pittsburgh and the outskirts in Washington County and other places. There's more of the old substance of friendship, of helping one another. To this day, my sister lives in Illinois, downstate Illinois, and her neighbors, I go see them. They know me now. She's in assisted living. They care about her. They do things. They've always looked after her. They mow her yard. It's a kind of interaction, social and moral interaction,
Mm.
maybe based on the church, I don't know, but certainly on a morality that you don't see among the elites that I knew for 30, 40 years of a working career. And so I think that's
Yeah.
to build a balanced picture. You're going to have to talk critically of elites and the way they
I
live.
think,
I find conformism among elites. I always hear this thing about, well, everybody in the Midwest, they're all the same. I see the conformity among elites. They say and do the same things. I go to dinner parties and I hear the same conversation again and again, and the same, snickering at other people in their lifestyle. So, let's be fair.
I mean, actually, the research shows that the group that reports the highest pressure to conform are the 8% of Americans who are progressive activists, where
Mm.
over 60% say they feel intense pressure to conform with the opinions of their friends. Conservatives, only 37%. That said,
Interesting.
Greg, you and I do diverge. I mean, I think they're good people all over, striving to live decent lives, whether they're in the middle 50% or the top 20%. And I think that, so I wouldn't have the blanket condemnation of elites as lacking genuineness or caring that you've articulated, although I must say it's a common tradition within the middle 50% to depict elites exactly like that. Um, and I think that, I mean, I've lived in sort of two class locations myself. I mean, I was born very silver spoon, and as you can tell from a months in Siena, I still am.
Hmm.
But my husband's family was very middle class, middle 50%. His father was a blue collar factory worker. And I think both cultures have a lot going for them. And I think both cultures have a lot of bullshit. I think that's,
Right.
people are people.
I want to talk about one thing that I thought was fascinating in your book, or maybe this wasn't in your book, but you mentioned that your mother and father came from two different cultures,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
and one of their first big arguments was on the virgin birth.
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Their first big argument was about the virgin birth.
Okay, I get that. And I'm thinking of this stop the steal. I mean, that this whole issue of some obviously distorted myth that is serving a purpose to cohesively bring people together, similar to, like I said, raised Catholic. I mean, when I go back and look at all of the foundations of it, it's kind of bizarre. I think now, but that they will allow themselves to be affiliated with this distortion of reality, stop the steal or whatever, because it gives them that kind of social cohesion. Am I explaining that correctly?
Yeah, I remember, I guess who was it who said that Trump voters take him seriously but not literally?
Mm,
Um, I think Stop the Steal was resonated for a couple reasons. People in the middle very often, I mean, Bernie Sanders articulated the same thing, that people feel ripped off. People feel like they're futures have been stolen from them, that their birthright as Americans have been stolen from them. And the reason they feel that, often it's written off as just racism, if they're sad about the loss of white hierarchy. But there's a lot of economics to show that, you know what, their futures that Americans were stolen from them. Virtually every American used to do better than their parents, used to earn more than their parents in the decades after World War II. But now only about half do. That's a decrease of 40%. So there are 40% of Americans who feel that they have lost touch with the American dream. And in fact, there was a recent poll out of that left-wing rag, the Wall Street Journal, that said that 70% of Americans felt that the American dream is no longer attainable. So the Stop the Steal tapped the sense by folks in the middle that they've been ripped off.
Mhm.
And I think they have been ripped off. I don't think they were ripped off by a rigged election, but they were ripped off by a rigged economy. And Trump really is their middle finger. They finally found a way to get to the likes of me and my friends in San Francisco,
Mhm.
and they're driving us completely nuts.
Mhm.
Completely. I mean, we think about them every day now.
Mhm.
And for 40 years, we didn't give them much of a thought. So I think the virgin birth analogy is that, and this is just my own quirky thing. I don't know, Greg, whether you agree at all, but if you have a group and part of membership in that group, part of becoming a member of that group is to embrace something that is on its face implausible, then it creates real loyalty to the group because you don't want to look bad in having been so gullible. I think that the Stop the Steal has the same logical structure as the virgin birth and serves many of the same purposes with respect to those who believe in the virgin birth.
I
Right.
thought one of your best chapters, I hadn't heard this said before, was equating this strong attachment to religion to mental health, so that if you can't afford, I think you put it this way, if you can't afford a shrink or professional
Therapy is
help.
expensive, but praying is free.
Yeah, I thought that
Mhm.
was quite insightful, and I think
Yeah.
that's probably really true. And it goes to people's needs. I mean, if you don't have, and most people don't have access to a psychiatrist or psychologist, then that religion will play that role. I mean, Marx said that. Marx said that's the beauty of religion going forward.
Yeah, he did.
But I think it's again, and I want to understand it to be understood that I'm critical, but I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I appreciate who you're directing it to. And I don't always understand why they don't get it. But I think where we break down is around Fetterman, to be honest with you,
Is
because
around.
Fetterman, Mr. Fetterman, Senator
Hmm.
Fetterman.
Well, keep in mind, Mr. Fetterman has hit very tough sailing, and I was writing this at a very different
A different
period during
time.
Yeah,
John
well,
Yeah.
Fetterman's
let me
history.
expand on that. Let me expand
I mean,
just on
yeah.
Fetterman, because I know Fetterman. I mean, I live in Pittsburgh. I grew up around, I didn't grow up, but I was active around Braddock, where he was mayor,
Hmm.
where he came
Hmm.
from. We were trying to save a hospital there. We're trying to save
Hmm.
a facility for women in need.
Yeah.
And he was the mayor. And trust me, we knew from the beginning he was no progressive. He was all
Really?
Fetterman, sure. And he didn't do a damn thing about the Braddock Hospital. That
Hmm.
struggle went on for 2 or 3 years. I have a deceased comrade who was there every day on a stool with a sign, "Save Braddock Hospital." He didn't do
Hmm.
anything about it. He's
Hmm.
notorious for chasing a black man down the street with his
Yes.
shotgun. Those are real stories. His kids
Hmm.
went to private schools in Pittsburgh. That was all, using the expression, I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought it up, bullshit. That was all bullshit.
Hmm.
But among my progressive friends, they wanted to believe that Fetterman was something special. I remember we were demonstrating against an anti-war demonstration, and three people that I knew that are progressive and good people walking up and they're saying, well, Fetterman, we're going to vote for him because for lieutenant governor because he's against fracking. He wasn't against fracking. It was in people's imaginations.
No, he
And
wasn't against fracking.
yeah, so
Yeah,
now
but don't you think there's an evolution? I mean, if you're writing about Fetterman early, and now you look at Fetterman now, you have different observations. Who's the
he's
guy
the
from
same
Kentucky?
Fetterman. He's the same Fetterman.
Ron Paul. If you're writing about Ron Paul a couple of years ago and you're writing about him right now, there's an evolution. You're seeing a
There
change.
is. I don't see a change in Rand Paul, and I don't see a change in Fetterman. That's my point. My point is that if people would examine their beliefs, they took the superficiality of his position. He wore cargo shorts all the time and a hoodie, and that was like an
And he
expression of
suffered
some
and he suffered
rebelliousness.
in
It was
deep
not.
depression and a stroke, and he did a
Oh,
lot of things that
come
are
on, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the larger issue is that people sometimes, and Greg said this too, is like, I'm giving up on the Democratic Party. I'm not giving up on the Democratic Party. First of all, I think it's suicidal at this point to give up on the Democratic Party. But we have a lot of talent in the Democratic Party. Marie Gluesenkamp-Paris, who's a representative from Washington State, is an incredible talent. Ruben Gallego, from who just won the Senate seat in Arizona, is amazing. He is one of the reasons I was so entranced with Fetterman is I called him a maestro of masculinity. Ruben Gallego is a true maestro of masculinity. He understands that if you have blue collar guys struggling to make ends meet, two of their most cherished ideals are, and they're both masculine ideals, are being the provider and being the protector. And Ruben Gallego goes in, he says to Latino men, I know what you want is a big ass truck. And what you want is your troquecito, which is like Spanglish for truck. And you want to support your family and you want to protect your family. That is the way that Democrats can go in and reclaim the power of masculinity,
Right.
which they have ceded to Republicans to our great detriment. And so that is, it's a little bit different strain than John Fetterman had, but both of them, I think, are really important and emblematic for that. For them. Another bright light, I mean, those two are commonly considered, quote, moderates. But there are other bright lights who are progressives. Zoran Mamdani is a great example. Zoran Mamdani, what he did is he took the economic sense of never, running hard to stay in place of this middle 50%. And he married it with the increasing economic anger of younger college grads who often can only get gig work in their 20s, and in their 30s, they can't afford childcare, and there's no way they can ever buy a house. That is the economic future of the Democratic Party. And I think we got a lot of talent. I think we just,
Joan, the Democrats reject Mamdani, and the Democrats,
sorry.
Well,
Jeffries will not endorse him. No, Pat, Jeffries will not endorse him. Schumer will not endorse him.
Who
The Democratic
Yeah, shame on
you're
them.
talking about the
They're silly.
Democrats being Jeffries and
Look,
Schumer and all that.
look.
There's a lot of Democrats that are
One,
showing up at Bernie rallies going
one,
absolutely crazy
Yeah.
for those
Yeah.
opinions.
once again, you got to go to history. I was involved in the Jackson campaign in the Democratic Party twice. I was engaged with that. That was rejected by the Democratic Party. That kind of movement towards progressivism it's not new for the Democrats to reject it. Obama was part of this whole Democratic leadership circle that came out in the 80s that embraced neoliberalism.
He was
And
part of the
and and
neoliberal turn.
and they
That's
dropped
right.
the Democratic Leadership Council or committee, whatever it was, DLC. They dropped it because they didn't need it because the whole Democratic Party was swung over to that stuff. That's why you don't hear about that anymore. And Obama's, I mean, you're right about the Democrats missing the point because here's Obama that gets elected in those same key states that many people turn and say, oh, they voted for Trump. Those same key states voted for Obama
Yeah.
twice. Why? For
Well,
the reasons you give, Joan. People wanted change. They turned to
Yeah,
Obama because they want people
they
who
did.
were had racism, did not associate with black people, voted for Obama because they wanted change.
That's right.
And then they
And
turn
the
around and
same
vote.
reason they voted for Trump.
Exactly. Exactly. So how can the Democratic Party get it? I mean, that's what I think you ought to be
That's what
addressing is how can you get the
your
Democratic Party to get it?
recommendations are increasing, union support and listening and not doing the stupid Hillary misstatements. And I,
Yeah.
you are a big fan of Jennifer Sherman, right? Have you met Jennifer?
Yes.
I love
Mm-hmm.
her. We had her on our podcast. I
Mm-hmm.
love
Her
her
work is
way she
important.
does sociology, where she comes
Mm-hmm.
in and she listens and interviews, and the insights that she has
Yeah,
from that
I know.
are prominent. And
Yeah,
you do that too. That's what I
yeah.
learned from your book. If you just sort of take the time to shut up and listen, you can learn a lot.
Yes, I know. I know. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot. And one of the things, I mean, I'm no Trump fan, but one of the things that I credit Trump with is the end of neoliberalism. Um,
Hmm.
because Greg is right that Democrats joined Republicans in the 1980s and beyond, and said that, free markets are going to make us all richer and a rising tide will raise all
Well,
boats. And you know what? It didn't. It rose
Right.
some boats. It did not raise most
it's the
people's
same old
boats.
boats.
And I think the Democrats had a hard time breaking up with neoliberalism. That was one of the reasons why I personally, although I'm a feminist, was not enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton's nomination. But Democrats now, by and large, have broken up with neoliberalism. They
Right.
have recognized that it was a wild and sexy dream in the late 70s. It didn't work out. I think that it's really important. I try to avoid hindsight, of 2020. But Trump has changed that. He has really gotten both parties to recognize, although neither party is acting on it right now, that if you don't provide a stable economic future for the broad range of Americans, you are creating a very, very dangerous situation where democracy is at stake.
Right.
And I think people now realize that. Now, what to do about it, they're still a little vague, and I hope they'll read my book because I think I have some very concrete and practical suggestions. But Trump really was a wake-up call.
Your book was great, one of the better ones because it like I said, it took me through my journey
Mm.
as I was
I'm
reading
glad.
your work, and I think it came out at a good place. I mean, I understand Greg's frustration about okay, the Democratic Party is a pretty poor vehicle, but by gosh, last weekend there were 8 million people in the street, and there were next to my house there were literally thousands and
Wow.
thousands of people, and I'm just hoping that somebody's going to be able to tap that,
Yeah.
like the Tea Party tapped
Hmm.
that anger. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm
And I
hoping
hope we can
something.
do it within the Democratic Party instead of,
Well,
what happened with the Tea Party. My
so
message really is that if you care about climate change, if you care about LGBTQ issues, if you care about defense of democracy, you better start to understand the class dynamics that are driving American politics. Because if you don't understand them, the only group that does is the central governing committee of the Republican Party. They
right.
understand these class dynamics perfectly. They are manipulating them perfectly. And it makes it really easy for them to do so if people on the left remained oblivious.
Final thoughts, Greg? Do you have any wine recommendations while
Yeah.
Joan's in Italy that you
Yeah, you're
might
in
point her
absolutely,
to?
absolutely. There's some good stuff there, but no, I would just say I'm more optimistic in your sense. I think that Trumpism is going to hit the reefs and very quickly. The economic policies can't work, aren't working. We're on the verge of an economic really catastrophe, only exacerbated by Trumpism. I mean, we already had bad things going on in our economy with inflation, which never was resolved. And I think his foreign policy is going to explode too. So I envision a change, and the Democrats will get another shot at it. But then I can't envision what they're going to do because they don't have a program. And without a program, what scares me is J.D. Vance. I think J.D. Vance would be much worse than Donald Trump because he has at least a veneer of respectability. He doesn't interrupt people. He doesn't scream and yell and say stupid things and lie as much as he does, or as obviously. So we're in for a bad road. We're in for a bad road because I can't see any escape lane out of this trajectory we're on. But I'm really happy that you have that book. Again, I don't represent the working class, but I know it. I know it well, I think. I think what you're doing is good. I mean, I think that's what we need to do is expose more people to what the real problem is. So I thank you for your book.
No, right. Yep. Thank you, Joan. I really appreciate your time and your scholarship, and you just seem like a neat person. So
Thank
I
you. Thanks. I
wish you luck.
appreciate the
Enjoy
invitation.
Siena.
You have a big
Thank you.
fan. You have a new fan. So just
Thank you.
to let you know. Okay. Bye now.